Hey everybody, it's Sarah Norris.
And Carrie Eink.
And we're occupational therapists at the STAR Institute. And today we're going to be tackling something that is easily misunderstood. There's not a whole lot of information out there about it. We're going to be talking about depression and sensory processing and integration challenges.
Yeah, so this is when we start talking with clients, with parents, and we're doing that initial phone call. So often we hear the similar story of that they've been to a mental health provider, they've been to their doctor, and they've expressed that they've been experiencing symptoms of depression and asking, is it depression? Could it be sensory based? Could there be a sensory basis in this?
Yeah, typically when someone is depressed, that's not what their psychologist or psychiatrist or physician is going to be thinking about is there a sensory basis for it? So we're going to kind of take that as a platform that we can provide some information on this. We are not claiming to be psychologists, psychiatrists, physicians, and we're not attacking this from a mental health position. We're looking at it from a sensory processing and a sensory integration position. So this is not applicable to every form of depression, every depressive episode, but we're talking about those instances where there is an overlap. And we do see clients that come in who are chronically depressed and have had trouble managing their depression, and they're coming to the realization there's some sensory pieces that haven't been addressed that we think are contributing to that, the persistence of their depression.
Yeah, so we thought it might be a good way to talk about it, the relationship, is talking about two specific client cases that we've seen recently that kind of intersect that depression and sensory processing and integration challenges. So I'll start, and I saw a teen who came into the office, and the parents were saying she was no longer going to her classes in high school. She was losing interest in everything she liked to do. She belonged to cross country, to soccer, and she no longer wanted to go to these things anymore. They had a really hard time getting her out of the house. She had been to OT when she was younger, but she hadn't been in several years. And so they were wondering, is she just under-responsive to sensory input? And they came in and wanted to do an assessment. And what we found through the assessment is that she was actually over-responsive, and in such an over-responsive state and such a high state of stress that her body was so stressed that it was actually in a shutdown state. And so I really had to reframe this idea to parents that no, it's not that she's under-responsive and just no longer responding to sensory input. It's that her body's actually so overloaded that she can no longer take in any more input. And so what they were trying to do at home was to have her go outside and jump on the trampoline and take her to all these events that had high stimulation to try to kick her nervous system into gear. And actually that was what we found, was that was kind of opposite of what they should be doing. And actually they needed to provide her with a soothing space, with a safe space to go to let her nervous system be less stressed.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment on that case, that's something that we see really frequently, that when people come to us and they're feeling depressed, they're feeling like there's no hope, that they don't really feel like they have the ability to make changes in their lives. So many times it's because they're beyond what was previously more of an anxious state, where they were experiencing a lot of stress but were still able to function. At some point that became too great of a load for them, pushed them over to this shutdown place where it's no longer really worth trying. And that's a really hard place to be, and it's a really hard place to understand how to support someone. And when we're looking specifically at the sensory pieces, how do we help use their sensory systems to get them back to a healthy place where they can function?
Yeah, and I think another big piece of that was really educating the parents and giving them information about how to talk with her, when to talk with her, when not to talk with her, when to give her space, how to give her tools that she could use on her own that didn't require added stimulation of her parents coming in the room. And there was just this huge moment of her feeling understood by her parents and her finally feeling like, this, I actually needed less and I could never explain it, but this makes sense that I was actually way too stressed. I wasn't under responsive. She was kind of thinking that too, and really kind of shifting that thought process, and giving those calming strategies and figuring out what worked for her body when she was really heightened was really meaningful.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about another form of depression that we see intersecting with sensory processing challenges. And that's when someone is under responsive to sensation. And that's when they actually need more sensory input for it to really register as important. So an example of someone who is under responsive is someone who doesn't really respond to sensations in an alerting way like we would expect. So for a lot of people, if you hear a loud noise, you might be, what was that? If there's a sudden movement, it's going to catch your attention and you're going to alert to that. With people that are under responsive, that doesn't happen as easily for them. It might take multiple loud noises to wake them up, to get them moving. So when we see individuals that are on that under responsive side, they are the ones that need more of that input to wake them up. And I'm going to talk about one individual that I've worked with in the past who was so under responsive that it was really hard for him to wake up. And so he spent a lot of time sleeping, and that really impacted his ability to work. It had impacted his ability when he was in school. So luckily he was smart and was able to get through it anyway. But being able to function, he just couldn't get awake enough to really feel like he could function. And over time, that was really impacting his ability to be successful and to accomplish his goals. And he started to feel like he couldn't really achieve any of his goals, that they were unattainable. And it was really clear that he just wasn't getting enough input, and he wasn't able to adjust what he was getting to get more. And so through figuring out ways for him to wake up his nervous system and finding those things in his environment that helped him alert, and doing them for long enough and often enough to get to that place where he felt awake, made a big difference in his ability to make goals and to take action.
Yeah, I am consistently having the conversation with some of the adults that I work with that when we get into teenage and adult years, we no longer are getting the type of input that we got when we were younger. We're not going to playgrounds as much anymore. Swinging isn't something that we're doing every day at recess. We're not, getting on the merry-go-round and spinning around anymore, because a lot of times for adults, that's not the common activities that we do every day. And so it can be, sometimes adults will ask me, so what would we do in treatment? You're not going to have me get on swings, are you? And I just am thinking about the client that you were talking about. And for me, the answer would be, we would try it. Mm-hmm. Because I've seen with 40-year-old adults, you get them on a swing and it's that same brightening and increase of arousal that we see with 5-year-olds when they get on a swing. And really starting that conversation of how can we, if you need more input, what kinds of things can we do? Do we put a trampoline in your living room? Do you go to the park in the afternoons? Do you take a walk to a park and get on the swings? Because sometimes that can be what your body needs in order to get up to that place where you can be thinking and feeling in that just right space.
And thinking about this individual, one of the biggest factors that made things better for him was that the people that he lived with were able to recognize ways that they could support him. And so encouraging him to get physical activity with them and to get out in the sun instead of staying in a darkened room, and getting involved in activities that gave him a little structure to his day made a huge difference. Because as teens and adults are starting to lose some of those playful activities that they had as children, sometimes the only options they have are more sedentary activities like reading, playing video games, and things like that. And so getting him re-involved in things that he had enjoyed when he was younger, and figuring out ways to get him active and joining a class and having things on his calendar, made a big difference in his ability to show up for things across the board.
Yeah. So kind of to wrap it up, a lot of times clients will say, okay, well, if this is sensory related, should I just be seeing an OT? And should I just be focusing on sensations? And I think our answer is always that building that team of support is going to be the most helpful. Finding your support system that you feel connected to, you feel respected by, but it is absolutely important to be addressing emotions and sensations if you're feeling those depressive symptoms and you have identified sensory-based challenges.
Yeah, and so if your primary concern is that you have depression, the answer might be start with mental health, but that doesn't necessarily mean that going to a mental health provider is going to be able to manage all of your different symptoms that are contributing to that continued mental health challenge. You might need to add to your retina of people that are helping you, or the strategies you're using. So we know that mental health challenges like depression, like anxiety, etc., they're complex and they're not just a one quick fix kind of thing. So we're not saying that sensory strategies are going to help you manage your depression by themselves, but we certainly have seen that it can make a big difference in your toolkit towards being able to find that place where you can function again.
Yeah, and if you've seen any of our prior videos, we've addressed some of the other mental health concerns, ADHD, anxiety. So feel free to check those out if you're also kind of having questions about that. And feel free to ask us any questions that you might have. Thanks, guys.